Welcome to the Dialogue Architects, where we explore how enterprises can thoughtfully design, scale, and govern conversations between humans and machines. Today, we're joined by Nick Thomson, who's joining us from Cape Town, South Africa, the current general manager of GotBot, a company that's actively consulting big brands today with their agentic AI projects, and on LinkedIn, a self-described bot overlord. Nick, welcome to the podcast. Hey, Nick. Welcome. So excited to chat with you. I feel like I've seen you in the broader conversational interspace space for a long time now, and I'm really keen to kind of hear about your story. One of the things that I love about your experience is you have a lot of hands-on keyboard experience with customers and high-level kind of project management experience. So you've really experienced all of the different roles that kind of exist in these types of projects. And I'd love to hear, really, just to kick off today, tell me your origin story. Where do you come from? How did you end up in this space? What did it look like, your journey to here?
Thanks so much, Lauren, for the intro. It's really nice to be chatting to you. Rasa has really been a special part of my journey, but in a very quick nutshell, I was running away from sales for a very long time. And then 6.5 years ago, I started a job at GotBot as an account manager and handling a lot of the on-the-ground requests. It started very quickly with really jumping into natural language processing and playing around with intents and training phrases and responses. And then one very fateful day, a senior colleague of mine asked if I could update an API call for one of the servers that we were talking to fetch information to display to the user. And in that moment, I wasn't even sure what an API was, to be honest. But I thought, look, I'm running away from sales, so let's go as deep as we can into the technical side of stuff. And basically from that was really the beginning, I think, of my understanding that there's a limitation with building bots if you don't understand how to write code which can interact with APIs. And basically for me, they're learning what I needed to with JavaScript, with Postman, to then basically building those APIs and then seeing really where that went, because I mean, a lot of bots just need APIs. So if you can figure out the way to get the information safely and then show it to the user, it's really quite a copy and pastable exercise. So that was the start of me jumping into the configuration side of APIs with bots. But my deep love, I think, actually came from NLP and actually interacting with the Duckling and entity extractor of Rasa's a long time ago, because as soon as I learned how to write the JavaScript of how to talk to the APIs and fetch the information, the next thing I wanted to do was figure out how I could build and work on something locally, because the issue is all of our stuff was in the cloud and you can't exactly build a bot locally and do the things. So the best way for me to learn about bots was actually first figuring out how to install Rasa locally on my computer and then playing around all the different types of config, because we were in a place where we were trying to move from an old type of tech into the new type of tech. And there's so many cool things that Rasa did that we were thinking about, okay, cool, well, let's try and embrace some of these things. So learning Python was actually purely to run Rasa. And then I was so excited as soon as I got my action server fetching real live weather information. And I think that's the cool thing with bots, is it's actually very satisfying once you start at the very simple idea of what it can do and then kind of incrementally making it better and more impressive and seeing where the failures are and fixing them. And yeah, I mean, fast forward a few years later, I just spent a lot more time training teammates to do certain things so that I didn't need to do all of the on-the-ground work. And now I spend a lot more of my time making sure that when we're talking to clients or when clients are asking for certain things to be done, that we're very clear about what is being asked for, because it's very easy to misunderstand what is being requested and then to potentially even build something that isn't being asked for. So trying to make sure that we actually are aligning on what the intention is, because there's 50 different ways that you can accomplish the same thing, and trying to just do it in a way that is going to provide return.
Yeah. I think that's something I've noticed more today than certainly 2 years ago is how many different ways there are to kind of scramble an egg. I mean, you could, before there was really only so many options, and you really pulled some good bits and pieces out of the Rasa archive there, from Duckling to, intent management. Those, now I think folks that are coming into the space from the agentic AI arena definitely would look at those words and think, wow, y'all are a bunch of dinosaurs. But they're still active in projects today, here and there.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, I think it's fun to hear your story, because I think that parallels very much my experience as well.
Cool.
My kind of dive into the technical universe really began with Rasa as well. I came very much from kind of the drag and drop UI based world of building conversational interfaces, and then with Rasa, you got to move it locally. So I think that was also a part of my journey. Either way, I'd love to maybe just to ground our conversation today, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your current job role today at GotBot. What are you working on? What's your day-to-day activity? And then we can dive in, because I'd love to hear a little bit more of stories from the field, things that you're doing with customers today.
Yeah, it's trying to build. It's quite a complex role, just because there's requests, for example, where there's technology that's flashy, like large language models, which everyone wants to have an element of generative AI in their workflows. And there's great places for the generative AI, but there's also really great tech in place long before generative AI that can do the exact same job with benefits or more rigid workflows. And so what I do find myself doing quite a bit of is tempering down the beliefs of what GenAI is actually capable of, because the reality is we've got some excellent workflow mechanisms that don't require any type of GenAI. A lot of the time it can just be number selections or regex based or whatever. We don't need to always talk to the generative AI to make the decisions. So I find myself quite a bit building some really exciting fraud detection things, but then also having to communicate the limitations of what the tech can actually do.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things is just in South Africa, there's a huge focus on WhatsApp for mobile commerce. And what we really find ourselves doing is trying to connect clients who have very high workflow needs. So one of our clients, for example, had so many tracking order requests as phone calls that were very expensive for them, that as soon as we converted that to a link or a chatbot workflow that then they could put their tracking order in and then find the information, you could very clearly see the increase in bot workflows led to a very serious decrease in phone calls. So it's not very glamorous a lot of the time, but it's trying to find pain points where, for example, one of the companies that we work with has very complex routing for certain users. So there's one bot that you can go to, but there's essentially 50 different groups that could be coming to the bot, and each user has a different group, and different groups have abilities. Certain groups can speak to agents, certain groups have different benefits, and really building this menu that can be used by as many people as possible, but also being very custom to that specific user. And one of the interesting things is we just find a lot of clients wanting to still work with number menus instead of button menus. Some industries it works really nicely with button menus that you can kind of navigate your way through. But what we're finding is that number menus seem to be safest for some things. And building those self-service menus has actually been very helpful for a lot of our clients, because last year, for example, we were expecting, I have to get the numbers right in my mind, what they were, but we were essentially expecting, I think it was something like 10 million messages over the course of a month. And we received something like 20 million messages in the first 3 days. So we had a very, very, and the network that we have is excellent, but essentially we needed to scale our systems very quickly to handle the volume, because if we didn't scale the systems, then there'd be massive delays. And the issue is that, and it became like a media thing where essentially if we weren't going to handle it digitally, there's going to be a problem on the ground for the client. So there's a lot of the time very tense deadlines on resolving problems. Some of the really exciting thing, actually, maybe just another side of it, that is just touching into the workflows and marketing mechanisms from advert to workflow to interaction through WhatsApp as a channel. That's something that's been quite cool, where we can essentially send out broadcasts to users and help clients manage lists where they can interact with their users. And a product catalog following WhatsApp.
That's exactly kind of the similar build pattern that I'm seeing starting to emerge, is that you have this kind of like generative fallback, and then once you figure out those core use cases, pulling them out and making them slightly more, let's say, formalized, whether that be in the, if I'm using the word formalized because I think there's lots of ways, it doesn't necessarily have to be entirely hard coded, but there's lots of different ways to do that. So I think we're seeing a similar pattern with some of our customers over here as well. I would be curious, especially as we're talking about like dialogue architecture. I think one of your jobs when you're serving your customers ultimately is to help them set up that architecture, deciding when to use what where. And that's actually, I think, becoming one of the most interesting challenges in the sphere today, because there's no rules necessarily about you have to do it this way or that way. How do you approach these challenges with your customers? Where do you even begin? How do you start to set up these projects?
Well, it really simply will come back to what is most important a lot of the time, and that can be answered by what is most important, it being very quick, it being very cheap, or it being very complicated. And then usually you can find, okay, we want it to be very complicated and we want it to be built by tomorrow. In that case, the third option, which is price, is slightly negotiable. So it's really trying to figure out, like, is it a complexity thing? Because then we need to really work around testing and then iterative launching, because launching something which has 4 modules of complexity and testing them all at the exact same time is it's a QA nightmare. Just trying to align with the testers, aligning with the team who's making the changes, making sure that everyone's testing the latest version. I think trying to agree with me, trying to understand, is the timeline the most important? Is the complexity the most important? And then really mapping it out, because I think that's something which I thought to a certain extent AI would solve by mapping it all out. But the thing is, what I'm finding is a lot of it is actually still very hard coded, because it's not like with an API, for example. You can only really speak to the final API once you've gotten all the information from the previous steps. You can't just go to the last one first, because there's a very specific process for, you need to check a few things before you go to that step, before you go to the next step. Yep. And I've seen a little bit with the generative AI implementations that we have, is that multi-step workflow understanding is just not there. And the reality is that's where the biggest value is getting 4 pieces of information, handing it over to an agent, sending that closed ticket information into their fresh desk or into their Zen desk or whatever it is, so that the loop is closed.
Absolutely. And I think that's actually what you just mentioned is a similar theme I've noticed with lots of different practitioners, I'll say, that have been in the conversational interface space before, let's say, the agentic AI revolution. Is all of us are kind of waiting to go back to these first principles of, hey, we were building conversational AI so it could do stuff for users, not just give them a paragraph of text.
Yes, exactly.
I think that's the thing that I feel like we all need to collectively keep fighting for, is like, at the end of the day, we want these things to actually do things for users. We don't want, just telling them how they could do it themselves doesn't always solve the problem. So they've really taken self-service to the next level there in terms of, figure it out all yourself. Nonetheless, I'd love to dive now a layer deeper. So once you've kind of figured out your project, I think you said fast, cheaper, complex, pick 2. Once you get to that level, what are some of the things that you're noticing in the way that you set up projects today? Has anything changed, or is it pretty much the same?
One of the things that has been the most amazing implementation is using a tool called Excalidraw, which is a completely free tooling. I wonder if I can maybe open one of these things up here, but essentially just using Excalidraw as a way to draw out the full diagrams so that the entire team is on the same... Yeah. So
do you mean like flow diagrams, or are you talking about mapping out the architecture of your project?
So this over here, okay, maybe, I don't know if you're going to be able to see the whole thing, but this is just mapping like a validation flow So
Yep.
it's
Flow
like
diagram.
there's
Yep.
multiple steps where it has to check previous and then building different menus based on certain variables that have been set. The thing is that we need to have a digital mechanism, and usually Miro actually works quite nicely as well. I've noticed a lot of people use Miro because it's really good for collaboration. And then can you still see me? I'm seeing it stuck. Okay, there you can see everyone moving again. So the most important tool really I would say is the drawing diagram, so that what we're scoping and what we finally build are prototypes at a very early stage. And something like Miro is really helpful because you can prototype what the whole flow should look like, make copy updates there, and that can be the single source of truth that the devs then can also use for the latest version. That diagram has probably been the biggest value for us because it shows the teams that we work with how complex the tech is, but also what can be done. So usually what happens is as soon as we start drawing the diagram out, the internal team realizes, sure, but we're stuck. We need to build a system internally so that the bot can then do the thing it actually needs to do. And then they end up building their system so that then we can pass the information back to them. So what's very helpful is when we're doing the diagrams and we're drawing and we're plotting, their own teams are part of the process, and then the technical teams start to very early see that they need to now work with their marketing team. The dev team has to work with the marketing team and that's the issue that we're sometimes seeing, is that there's so many different teams that are trying to collaborate with one another that it's very easy to miscommunicate or type up a very long email that no one reads, that has the set of instructions right in the middle of the email that everyone missed. I think trying to just make sure on a diagram level, this is what we're doing. Are we all on the same page? Because that's, I think, where the team starts to see, okay, we can break this down into different kind of timelines, and then just tracking all of that and the communication back through this is where we're at, because sometimes the progress doesn't look very quick because you're building architecture or you're getting APIs connected and there's actually back-end work that is needing to be done before the bot can give the answers. But I think the most important thing is with that diagram, what it usually does is it pulls everyone to this is what we're trying to actually accomplish. So without that, I think we've probably, as soon as we implemented that, we saved massive amounts of time because there's far less backwards and forwards and trying to see what we're actually talking about. It's quite clear on the collaborative documents.
Yeah. That would also be my recommendation to anyone that's building a conversational interface today, is at the end of the day, you need one single source of truth. No matter how hard-coded or how agentic it is, you need some kind of overview of the different user journeys that are available to your users. Even if one of them is a long-tail search, put it on a piece of paper so people know that it's there. Because once these agents start sprawling into different teams and different subject matter experts and different development teams, back end, it becomes impossible to keep track of all of it. So I think that's for me also, I think a very consistent part of being a dialogue architect at the end of the day is having these single sources of truth. I think this is the case for any vendor that's working in this space. A lot of your roadmap today is driven in many ways by customer demand. And I think we've got customers that really want to use it. And it does solve an organizational problem, I think, MCP. At the end of the day, someone still has to build all of these integrations, but having a protocol that unifies them in one place is an organizational solution. So I think MCP, it solves an organizational problem at the end of the day. It doesn't revolutionarily, it doesn't change the fact that you still need to build all of these integrations. And so at the end of the day, our customers still want to use it. And I think it does add some efficiencies to, let's say, types of tool calling that you might have within an agent. I think for me, what I think is even more challenging than MCP is actually A to A, so agent to agent protocol. Because at the end of the day, now you need to reach out to an external agent, which is entirely a black box. You have no internal controls over what that agent can do and the types of things that it can send back to you. So I think for me, that's where I see MCP, for me at least, in some ways could be guarded within an organization. But as you mentioned, once you think about MCP servers for vibe coders, people that are, actually generating code, and frankly, people like myself who, I'm not a studied developer necessarily. I just happen to have peeled the onion back far enough that I end up in an IDE at some point. So I think there's definitely going to be a lot more people like me who probably don't have the know-how to immediately say, "Ooh, this is a dangerous command to be running right now."
So when I hear agent to agent, what we're trying to solve is, if you imagine like Nissan South Africa, for example, they have a South Africa bot. You go to the South Africa bot, but what would be really awesome is if there was ability for the agent down the street over here, or the agent who's in the middle of the upcountry with very, very little infrastructure around them. Would it be possible for us to potentially hand a user who is talking to the main bot over to an agent who is off-site, potentially on a different location? Because the workflows within Gotbot, we're seeing there is a need. There's definitely always a need to connect humans to other humans, but sometimes the need's far more granular than just I need to talk to a representative of South Africa. It could be something down to I need to talk to the person who's in my 5-kilometer vicinity. And being able to route the conversation to a much smaller network. So trying to figure out how we can build an architecture. That's what I mean by agent to agent.
Are you talking live agents then?
Yes.
This is always the vocabulary challenge.
Yes,
okay, I'm talking agent meaning, let's call it bot to bot. That's what I was talking about. Agent to agent, I think that's another piece of the puzzle, I would say. Live agent to live agent is another piece of the puzzle. But I see what you mean, having that local, especially in South, I mean, how many languages do you have in that country alone? So many. I can imagine the level of localization that you would need to provide a good service is quite high. So I can see that being huge.
What you just said about the bot to bot is within Gotbot, there's definitely a huge focus on agents. But there's also that the bigger South Africa to the more granular regional bot to bot as well, which that's not at all in it's not at all in production, but it is something that that's the next thing that we're solving with our release that is coming out in February next year. So the basis of that is it's being built around the bigger node to the smaller branches, being able to essentially do a workflow, not just within one bot, but being able to orchestrate the handing of the parcel of information between the one bot to another bot connector that could be in there as well. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just where do you store that wallet of information, which is the context that the bot then answers its questions from.
That's interesting, though. It's an orchestration challenge that's bubbling up, I think, more today than yesterday, because now we have, like, what we're seeing at customers is not necessarily like, let's say there is this bot to bot element where maybe you're a car financing bot in your bank and you want to be able to connect to the dealership bot. There's kind of that kind of use case. But on the flip side, I think we're also seeing across an individual organization, lots of different individual teams are getting budget to work on agents and building on different vendors, building on different systems, building with different goals. And I think that's the really interesting orchestration problem that's popping up that we're really trying to solve for here at Rasa is how do we make this all behave like one unified customer experience so that end user does not have to chat to 5 different agents that are branded differently, have a different voice, and unify that. And that's actually a pretty tricky technological problem because all of them have context. Some are more agentic than others. It's really a challenge. And I think but it's an interesting one nonetheless. And I think that's where, again, this whole theme of dialogue architecture comes in. How do we set this up and document it?
I think that is such an important thing. One of our clients this year had that exact problem where their problem from a brand perspective was that they had each of their own departments almost had their own bot with their own branding and their own style. And the issue is that they needed experts to really guide them on like, what is the best way that we could pull them all into the same thread and then accomplish multiple goals through the same thing instead of trying to each do their own little thing and then only touch 2% of the audience. So we definitely are seeing that. That's a really big thing because I think I think that's happening because company departments are becoming a lot more connected. And I mentioned that earlier just with marketing and advertising, and marketing teams are seeing I can automate things. And then there's the in-house teams, which are we need to somehow find a way to handle the volume of things that are coming in. And there's the two different sides of this. And I think that what we're at least seeing is that there's a lot more internal communication where there needs to be alignment, and where we find ourselves sometimes having to be the mediator between internal teams saying, hey, we see what you're doing here, we're seeing what you're doing here. What happens if we brought you guys together and did that? And that's where the diagrams come in, is we say, okay, well, whose side wins? Let's go this way. What do you think? And it's really just this negotiation internally with the client, with them saying, we want to do this thing, and then just really using us as the sanity of, that's a great idea, that's a bad idea, or that's excellent, let's do that more.
And what I'd love to hear from you, Nick, in the next kind of section is like, if you have any really good, compelling stories about things that went wrong that you solved, or interesting problems that you've had. I remember you talked about empathy. That might be an interesting one. And I'll kind of tee it off here slowly and let you mull it over a little bit. But Nick, I'd really love to learn, kind of to close out the session today as well, I'd love to learn about some of the customer side stories that you've had recently, challenges that have popped up that are either new or you had to work hard to resolve. What's been challenging that you've been working to overcome?
Sure.
Or everything's been easy. That's also good.
Most of the problems and this is something that you probably can't even air, is it's like really tiny things. Like one of our biggest issues in the last 2 weeks is talking to a client who's having the default fallback intent get hit less than 2% of the time. So we're haggling over how to make the final 0.5% so it's slightly better. And this, in their mind, is quite a serious problem. And it's trying to place the success of, but it's successful 97.5% of the time, and trying to communicate that in a way. Again, it's a communication thing of how we then can provide feedback. Because I think that that's the most important thing as well, is being able to very quickly see data. That's something that's been very helpful for us. Black Friday, for example, is we had a retailer do a Black Friday special through WhatsApp. And us very quickly, their website took too much strain. So we needed to very quickly cancel the broadcast because we didn't want to send more users to the website if the website's down. So that's the quick turning around of working with third parties like WhatsApp or business solution providers is really a bit of the types of problems that we have. Facebook accounts, us needing to do the correct process of applying for a WhatsApp number, getting it connected to the user's to the brand's WhatsApp account, to their Facebook pages. A lot of the protocols that we're needing to guide clients through so that their bots can stay connected to the platforms, because they're always changing. They've always got these new things, and the big problems usually will be when there's a broadcast that is sent that has phrasing that Meta says we don't like this for some reason, and then it gets banned, and then we need to try and unban or unblock. Wow. The main problems that we used to have were really from where we were at, I would say 2 years ago with our architecture, and we've been able to patch quite a lot of the problems. The biggest learnings were from in 2025 when we were expecting 100,000 messages in a period of a month, and we got that in a period of a day. And it's when the like system needs to make a quick adjustment, and having to get all hands on deck so that the service downtime doesn't affect the end user. It's really those types of things. What also usually happens is us being asked to switch certain workflows off because the client's APIs can't handle the volume. So for like a loan application, for example, or if there's some type of generative, we're going to find the best match for you, and then 10,000 users hit that thing in the first hour, then the system takes strain, and then we need to switch the system off so that the back-end API doesn't have meltdown. So it's those type of things. I mean, it's not really ever anything super catastrophic because of it only really does what we ask it to do. So it's not like we're ever really surprised by copy. That's also one of the
Hmm.
things that I feel safe about not embracing Gen AI as much is there's just less heartache and pain of what happens if someone
Yeah.
does prompt engineer the thing to say something really bad.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. The brand reputation element of it, that makes sense. And I think you were mentioning in general the high volumes. How do you manage the load there? What are kind of your approaches? Because I think that's something that, in some ways that's the best case scenario, right? Lots of people are
Yeah.
using your product, but on the flip side, obviously it's something that needs to be managed. I was curious because I struggle sometimes with containment rate, even though it's a classic contact center KPI. But at the end of the day, containment, like all of these people that are working in the contact center who end up also sometimes working on these agents, their whole life mantra and their bonus, it's all tied into containment, which at the end of the day, containment can also just be simply refusing to serve the user, but giving them some answer,
No,
So I think
exactly.
I think that's that focus on success metrics for me is so much more interesting and revealing than containment alone, which could simply mean I've just either dumped them this random link that may or may not have been helpful, or I've dumped them into this random queue with a hotline that's going to take 20 minutes, and I think that's finding ways to measure success for me. I feel like that needs to be part of our future versus kind of these classic, maybe slightly more old school call center metrics. Although I know they won't go away nonetheless.
Yeah. How
All
do we
right.
avoid that? Please rate my feedback
Yeah,
out of 5.
that's true. Which mostly we notice this as well, like in project, a high majority of the people that fill out that form are people who are not happy. The people that get solutions like objectively from, reading the transcript don't fill out that form because they're done, they're gone. The people that do fill it out are really angry. So that's something I've noticed. And last question for today. I'd love, we're on the cusp of a new year. So Nick, we're in a new year. It's 2026. What's your prediction? What do you think is going to happen this year? Any hot takes?
I think that people are going to lose their faith in agents running the world. I think that we're going to see far more studies of agents that didn't actually do what they were promised or what they promised to do. And then I think that there's going to be a bit of a hesitation as to just connect an agent into your environment because the reality is that these things are expensive or they can be expensive. They open you up to vulnerabilities. I think that there are going to be far more stories of people who incorrectly install things and get their computer contents deleted and their cloud credentials harvested. And it's obviously not something that is good in any way, but I think that has to happen for people to realize that when you do give an agent the ability to run as an administrator on your computer without putting it in a protected environment, you really are opening yourself up to vulnerabilities. And I think that the influencers are the ones realistically who are going to bite that bullet first. Maybe bite that bullet is not a good, not a
No,
good.
fair, fair, fair. There is a lot of influencers, a lot of hype grifters out there. One could argue, but I would agree. I think my twist on it is like I think I credit also my colleague Rod in DevRel for this prediction is like he's calling 2026 the economic reckoning
Yeah.
when ROI becomes non-negotiable, and I think that's
Yes.
that's fair. And I think that also in a sense is the precursor to your prediction. Folks are not going to continue to fund things that don't work. Only things that work survive. And I think, and I'm open to anything, however, on wherever it is on the agentic scale, I'm happy if it's working,
If
it's
it can do
safe,
it.
and customers are happy. So I think that's also where I'm feeling the same direction. No more frivolous agent projects. It has to work. It has to work in production.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Thank you so much, Nick. It's been an
Yeah.
absolute pleasure. I wish you the best. I love listening to your stories, especially because you have hands-on keyboard experience working with customers side by side. All the best to you and your customers in 2026, and we hope to see you again.
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. Same to you.